Charlie Zelli, Chair of the Met Council. This is the Committee of the Whole meeting, February 16th, 2022. It's a virtual meeting, and we're doing that under Minnesota Statutes Section 13D.021. And if you are monitoring our meeting remotely from the public, feel free to email us at public.info@metc.state.mn.us, and we will respond in a timely manner. And in order to call us to order, we will take a roll call to establish a quorum. Bridget.
Member Barber.
Here.
Chamblis.
Here.
Cumming.
Here.
Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Muse.
Here.
Sterner. Sterner. Vento. Vento. Wolf.
Here.
Zarin. Zarin. Chirizelli.
I'm here, and I believe we have a quorum. So the next item is approval of the agenda. We don't need a vote unless there is an objection or a correction or a change. But hearing none, I will assume the agenda is approved. We have two interesting information items. But first, the minutes that were sent out from our last meeting, February 2nd, 2022. Is there a motion and a second for approval of the minutes?
Lilligren moves approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second by Barber.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any more discussion? If not, Bridget, please call the roll.
Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
Chamblis.
Aye.
Cumming.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Lilligren.
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Muse.
Aye.
Sterner. Sterner. Vento.
Aye.
Wolf.
Aye.
Zarin. Zarin. Chirizelli.
Aye. The minutes are approved. So we're getting into the first of our two information items, our monthly update on the Metro Transit Police Work Group. And we'll hand it off to you, Councilmember Chamblis.
Thank you so much. And we've had a number of updates. Today we're going to have some more and allow council members to weigh in on where we're at. If you can continue. So we're getting close to our process for making recommendations. And we're going to be discussing the draft vision and information needs for the quarterly reports that have been recommended by our work group. And on this page, I believe Leslie is going to give an update on our plan for conducting the works, the group's work.
Councilmember Chamblis, Chair Zelli. Yes, I can walk through this slide. And this is really an updated version of what was shared with the Committee of the Whole last month. Just as a reminder, the work group, per the business item that was passed back in August, will report back its recommendations on February 28th. Currently, there are 2 work group meetings scheduled before the 28th, this Friday and next Friday. This Friday's is an added meeting above and beyond the work group's usual schedule. The work group's report that you'll see on February 28th will set out a high-level vision and recommendations. And then part of the recommendation will be that Metro Transit and the police department develop an action plan that would then return to the council for approval later this year. And there's some additional information later on in the presentation, but the idea is that the work group, the action plan would be brought back in draft form by May of this year. And based on how that conversation goes, Metro Trans and the police department would seek council approval in June. And this would set up this work to begin implementation by Q3 of 2022, which the work group felt was a good, urgent but reasonable timeline. So I think that's the end of this slide, and I'll turn it back to Councilmember Chamblis unless there are any questions on that.
Thank you, Leslie. Are there any questions on that timeline? I am not seeing or hearing any, so we'll continue on to discuss the draft recommendation based on our vision. It's under development and will be a part of our approach to our recommendations. We will be developing priorities and considerations for each issue statement and be seeking feedback from all council members as we incorporate this work. So our vision basically includes 3 things, which we've talked about before, and that's to provide a quality transit experience and do that using an anti-racist lens, an equity lens, and inclusive approach to transit safety, security, and policing, as well as addressing systemic issues that will foster relationships and partnerships with communities that we serve. And we want to do this in a way that demonstrates responsive leadership and accountability for results. Next slide. It's very important that as we move forward that we have collected data and information along with the feedback that we've received from our stakeholders, and that as we continue to solve and utilize best practices that we have quarterly updates. What transit security and policing data and information does the council want reported on a regular basis is a question that we would like to ask and see whether or not we have collected all of the information that we need and what information we will need moving forward. To give you some background, the August 2021 business item to form the police work group assumed that there would be quarterly updates on transit security by both Metro Transit and MTPD to the full council. And part of the work group's role is to identify how that information should be included in these quarterly updates. We've discussed, as I said before, the importance of both having good data and then using quantitative and qualitative data to guide us. So our next steps are that, as was stated earlier by Leslie, that we have our work group meeting this Friday morning, February 18th, and another meeting on February 25th, where we will be developing and preparing our recommendations, which would be due on the 28th of February. So our next steps would be to have another committee of the whole discussion with recommendations in March. In May of 2022, the committee of the whole discussion on the prepared draft action plan. And then in June, bringing the revisions based on the feedback to the council for approval, with implementation being in progress by July 2022. So I'd like to ask if there is any feedback on our process. What we're going to be doing is looking at the issues, prioritizing them this Friday, as well as our recommendations, refining those, getting those recommendations a little bit tighter, and then moving forward to the meetings that through the meetings that we have just discussed. So I'd like to ask if there are questions regarding the data and information that you think we need in addition to what we've collected. You can indicate by raising your virtual hand or your actual hand.
I'm not seeing anyone, so we can keep going. Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty much all I have for our update. The topics for as I said, are to next month come up with the recommendations and then develop our needs for the quarterly reports.
So, Councilmember Chamblis, I would expect we'd probably have a more robust conversation. I really appreciate the work of the work group. When we see a set of recommendations, you expect we'll probably be getting more nuanced conversation.
Yeah, I would think so as well. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Councilmember, and thank you all council member staff who are going through this process. That brings us to our Equity Advisory Committee annual report, and I really appreciate the work of the EAC, and we really want to make sure we give some time and understanding as to how they spent not just this past year, but maybe a little bit about where they see they're going the year ahead. And I think this is, shall I turn it over to you, Francisco, as co-chair, or I think I have Lila Eltawely, and I really butchered that name, so sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I will just do a quick introduction, and then we'll let the members of the EAC go ahead with the report. So just briefly, I'd just like to introduce my co-chair, Leah Goldstein-Moses, who's a community member, and also Brianne Rothstein, who is also a community member, part of the EAC. And together with other members of the EAC, we've been working on developing our report, which looking backward into the work that we've been doing in the last year or so, plus, but in addition to that, also presenting some ideas and suggestions of how to move forward the work of the EAC. So unless Lila has anything else to add? No? Okay.
So, nothing to add.
All right. So I'll just like to invite Leah Goldstein-Moses and Brianna Rothstein to go ahead with the presentation.
Hello and good afternoon. Brianne is not yet with us. I'm keeping an eye out for her name to pop up as added. She had an overlapping meeting and we thought the previous presentation would go a little longer, so we didn't predict it very well. I think I'll get started, and then Francisco and Lila, if you can help me out and keep an eye out for Brianne so that when she joins, you can let me know that she's here and we can welcome her. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our Equity Advisory Committee, both what we did in 2021, who we are, and what's on the horizon. So if we can go to the next slide, I'd like to offer a little context about how the Equity Advisory Committee came to be for those of you who aren't familiar with the history. Several years ago, community members began advocating for the creation of an Equity Advisory Committee. Community members were noticing and experiencing inequities that were resulting from Met Council practices. So the advocacy came in response to those observations and experiences. At the same time that community members began advocating for an Equity Advisory Committee, Thrive 2040 was adopted, and the Thrive 2040 plan particularly calls out equity in several ways. It noted that disparities threaten the future vitality of our region, and it centered equity as one of 5 outcomes. In addition to centering equity as one of the 5 outcomes, it also said that equity would be used as a lens to evaluate the operations, planning, and investment of the Met Council. So the idea is that equity would be very central to the work the Met Council would be doing in the next several decades. And the Equity Advisory Committee was then established in October 2015. And I see Brianne has joined. Thank you for joining, Brianne. I think maybe here I'll pause and just, Brianne, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit and share just a little bit about how long you've been on the Equity Advisory Committee, and then we'll continue with the presentation.
Hi, sorry for being a little tardy. My name is Brianne Rothstein. I have been on the Equity Advisory Committee since March of last year, so I guess it's been a year now, and I also chair the Housing Subcommittee. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm sorry I was just a tad bit late here. It looks like we're rolling with the presentation, Leah.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being here. I'll do the next slide, and then we'll go in the order that we planned. So we can go on to the next slide after the one we were covering. Wait for Greg's. Greg, we're seeing the streaming platform, not the slides.
Brianna, I thought we were getting a whole YouTube video of you. So that's
Yes,
very exciting, but that's not what we were here to see.
No.
I guess.
While we're waiting for the slides to come up, which I think they are in the process of coming up, I'll share that I have been on the EAC for 3 years now and have been co-chair since April of 2021, so just under a year. So like Brianne, have enjoyed having a leadership role and really enjoy the work of the EAC. And how's it going, Greg? Are we going to be back in the slides soon?
Yay!
Thank you. All
This
right.
looks right.
Yes. If we can go to slide 3, that would be great. So I will share that as the Equity Advisory Committee was formed, our purpose was really articulated in our bylaws. So our bylaws open with this purpose, which is to advise the council regarding the development of policy and appropriate processes for assessing and monitoring the council's performance against such policies. We are assuming in this that the council is taking effort to advance equity in the region. The council can also request us that we give advice regarding various policy issues. So I was listening with interest to the previous presentation, noting that the work of the Metro Transit Police Working Group is looking at equity as one lens in which they're centering their work. And so that would be a great example of a place where we might give advice. And we also wanted to rest some power with community members that serve on the committee by noting that the committee may identify additional policy topics for the council's consideration to address.
So who serves on the Equity Advisory Committee? Per our bylaws, we have appointments of committee members. There are 21 total voting members. There are 4 Metropolitan Council members who are, per our bylaws, supposed to sit on the EAC. You'll note we will come back to that because we do not have 4, so we're in violation of our bylaws currently. We have 8 geographic members, each representing 2 council districts, and then we have 9 at-large members. We also have some criteria for who is to be appointed that is, in addition to geographic, also demographic criteria for who is to be appointed. So the committee really is a racially diverse group of individuals as well. And there's also a spot that is reserved for someone with a disability as well as low income. So that's a little bit about who serves on our Equity Advisory Committee.
Sorry, we do have a picture of our members, but it looks like it didn't get updated, so we will forward that later. And I think one slide before this will have the names of our members.
So these are our members as they currently sit. We have several new appointees since January. And I will just add here that our membership is constantly changing. People are rolling on and off several 2 or 3 times a year. Next slide, please. So we did want to spend a brief moment talking about what the Equity Advisory Committee worked on in 2021. The first topic area, we have three subcommittees. The first one is affordable housing. This is the one I chair. Our priorities for 2021 were to hold regional convenings on affordable housing and understand how we can plug into the housing plan update, which is one of the regional plans that go with whatever Thrive 2050 is going to be called. I don't know if we've named it yet, but the outcomes of our priorities were we achieved 2 primary objectives in 2021. One was to write a memo for Met Council review and consideration upon approval of the LHIA, Local Housing Incentives Account update. We reviewed the proposed changes and met with staff and wrote a memo in response to the proposed changes that we're hoping will get consideration at the Met Council level. That was our big policy objective and initiative. And then the second one was to continue to plan a regional convening around the the federal money that's becoming available and kind of sweeping down to state, local, and regional government, and to understand better what money will be rolling from the federal to the Met Council, and if there's any way that we can plug in or any discretion in that spending around housing. We are still trying to get that scheduled with the intergovernmental staff people at Met Council, because we feel like they're best equipped to have the most up-to-date knowledge about what federal money is coming down. So that's the specific topic area for what we hope to be our first regional convening. Next slide.
Another priority for us in 2021 was focusing on public transportation with hopes that we would contribute to transportation policy decision-making, create systems for understanding what's happening in transportation. I know that came up as a to-do earlier today, thinking about what data is going to be needed. We had an idea about building a relationship with the Transportation Advisory Board and working more directly with Metro Transit on equity-related goals. We had a number of outcomes in 2021 related to transportation, and we gave significant portions of our meetings to transportation-related topics. For example, we had a visitor from MnDOT come and talk to us about the transportation plan update and talk to us about what their plans were, and we gave feedback and insights into that transportation plan. We've developed a relationship with the equity manager from Metro Transit, who also has come to us to talk about their definition of equity at Metro Transit and how that is placed in the context of transportation history, what's happened in our communities and current policies. We gave input on community engagement plans, including suggestions of other groups to talk to, how to structure those conversations, and what significant and meaningful community engagement would look like. And one of our members has served on the Transit Safety Planning Committee and has reported back to us and shared what they have been doing. Next slide, please. We also did some significant work related to council operations, and we started out with some priorities to review the council diversity and inclusion strategy and look at the DBE and MCUB programs. And in this area, we did a number of things in partnership with members of the EEO office. Our EAC members looked at the affirmative action plan, and embedded in the affirmative action plan are a number of data points that we looked at around the current outcomes and results related to who is employed, who's retained, and who's advanced. We looked at some of that contracting and employment data in relationship to a planned dashboard that's intended to inform the council about where there are opportunities, where there are weaknesses, where there are successes at a department level, at a position level, in multiple ways. We informed the council's ideas for using special allocation. There was a special allocation made last year that was designed to improve contracting outcomes for businesses that are owned by protected class groups. And we talked about how that allocation could be used to be effective. We began planning for an event to build relationships between businesses and purchasing managers. And as a committee, we made a recommendation that the council audit its administrative functions to find out what is lying underneath some of the results and outcomes that are being seen at the council that have stayed pretty stagnant for many years, if not decades. We'll go on to the next slide. We also had a priority area on One Metro partnerships, which was this idea that we would update the council and give some advice about organizations and groups it could partner with that are outside of the council, and internally to support the equity initiatives that the council is taking on that are led by staff. So some of the things we did here is former council member Ferguson came to meet with us and talk about the BIPOC committee, and we learned about how our work intersects. We've met members of each of the council's equity change teams, and we've heard presentations from many departments. And we can go on to the next slide. So in 2022, as Brianne mentioned, we are onboarding many new members. We welcomed quite a few new members that were approved by the council, and they all began their terms in January with some onboarding and attending their first meeting. And we're continuing to get them connected to the work of the council and the work of the EAC so that they feel comfortable bringing the expertise that they have from their communities to our work on the EAC. We will be focusing on those same priority areas that Brianne and I just talked about: affordable housing, public transportation, operations, and partnerships. But one thing that our members have asked us to do, and in particular, this has been raised by our new members, is to add a lens of how those priorities and the Met Council's work intersect with other areas affecting communities inequitably. So things around physical and mental health, access to employment, healthcare, recreation, all the things that we need to live good, fulfilling lives. Look at policing, surveillance, and safety, and think about education and youth programs. So we're looking at how the work the council does and how we're informing things as the EAC intersect across multiple systems. Next slide.
So we're going to conclude our presentation with, so we talked a little bit about what's working well and what we're doing and how we're making progress. And we'd like to finish the presentation with what's not working well and what we're asking of the Metropolitan Council as a body today. And this is the collective voice of the EAC. Some of the challenges that we have are that we have a lot of presentations where there's a lot of time spent educating the EAC members about what the work of the Metro Council. And while that's really helpful context, it usually takes the vast majority of the time and we don't get a lot of opportunity to provide feedback. And then when the feedback is asked for, it's, what do you think? And so having a facilitated discussion would be really valuable after those. And we did just have a great example of that yesterday where Selena came and asked us a set of facilitated questions. So that was wonderful. When we do get asked for input, we don't know how it's used or there's no feedback loop. Again, the exception was just last night, Selena came back to us after getting initial feedback. So while we do have an example of how that can work really well, we would welcome more of that into the future. When we have raised significant equity issues regarding proposed policy, we feel dismissed and there's a defensive stance when we're trying to critique the work, which again is expected. A lot of time and energy and work goes into these, but we feel as though we could, there could be more of an open-minded perspective when coming to us for feedback. And then the last one is that there's no clear path for influencing the Met Council directly. Do our minutes or our memos go into the council packet when we do present formal memo on a topic? How do we otherwise engage with the Met Council members directly? And so just wondering if there was some options for a clear path. So the last couple of slides are specific asks from you as a Metro Council body. Next slide.
So our members have raised a number of really good observations and ideas for how we can overcome these barriers and really tap into the strength that is our EAC and all the wisdom and knowledge that sits in our membership. So the first is to think about ways that we can expand the Equity Advisory Committee's influence. This could be done with a direct and simple pathway to guide council members' policy decisions. For example, we could be in a position where we are submitting a monthly report to the council with recommendations, or otherwise be providing recommendations directly out of our meetings to council of the whole meetings. And then with a feedback loop that guidance is being used and incorporated into policy decisions. Also, having a full contingent of council members serving on and regularly and consistently attending the EAC would help with that communication loop, because we would get to hear what's being discussed at the council of a whole and various subcommittees. And at the same time, those council members would be informed about community issues to bring them into their various committees and into the council of the whole. And we think that we would be more effectively staffed because of our focus on policy at the regional administrator level rather than in the EEO office. That way we would have a broader perspective of the full range of policies that are being addressed by the council, and the regional administrator would get to hear about the full range of experiences that are represented by our community members that serve on the EAC, which, as Brianne mentioned, have both geographic distribution and demographic diversity that really provides a rich and knowledgeable and wise set of perspectives.
Before I go on to the next, I just want to add to that last one that as we, as a region and as a governmental agency, seek to embed equity in all the work we do and not have it as a standalone committee or a standalone department of the Met Council, it will become increasingly important that the work of the EAC sits at a broader level. Next slide. We also are asking the Met Council members to consider implementing the recommendations that have already emerged from the EAC, which is to develop an equity analysis to accompany all proposals and recommendations. It could be a section of the staff report and include whether or not the EAC was engaged on the topic, again, particularly related to policy recommendations. The second one is that we have recommended as a body is to finance and conduct an independent external audit covering the last 5 years of Council's administrative application of federal and state equal opportunity provisions in its procurement, affirmative action, and the Civil Rights, Human Rights Act. Next slide.
Thank you. And I'll just add on to that last bullet. One of the things that we've heard is that there's a lot of efforts underway, but as you can see in the data, if you look at reports, the results have stayed stubbornly low and are really not achieving the outcomes that that effort would suggest. And so we think the audit will and should uncover ways that barriers exist and where there's opportunities for improvement. And then the final area that the EAC has come together and identified as a barrier is that we don't have the resources needed for us to function well. We have staff that support us, but they do many, many other functions as well. And we would like to have a staff that is really dedicated to our work and can be accountable to representing our voice at the council. Another thing is that our members, our community members, they are volunteering their time, and often EAC members are the only ones in a meeting not paid to be there. And if you think about all the expertise and wisdom they're bringing to the conversation, they certainly could be supported with a per diem that would allow them to manage their lives, contribute, and feel supported for that work. We want to make sure that the composition of the EAC is intentionally representative of the diversity of the region. So as Brianne mentioned, our bylaws require some diversity. We would like to look at that and have a partner at the Met Council that is really helping us in recruiting, ensuring that our membership is full, and ensuring that we are really reflecting all of the different perspectives in our region. And finally, we would like the staff that come to the EAC, as Brianne mentioned a little earlier, we had a wonderful conversation with Lila yesterday. We would love to see other staff that come to us be trained to facilitate discussion and listen for understanding so that we can really have productive dialogues that are moving us along and helping result in some of those great insights and policy changes that we are there to inform. So I think we will end our presentation there, and this is the part where we get to take questions and have discussion.
Well, let me jump in and thank you, Leah and Brianne, and those who are on the EAC to give the presentation. Also, your very candid, direct, respectful feedback, which we are open to and need to hear. And certainly some of the, I sense frustration is not new. I think I've talked to your chairman Gonzalez about in the past, but clearly you've laid out some very direct opportunities for us to improve that kind of relationship. Let's open it up, and Councilmember Johnson, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Leah and Brianne and Councilmember Gonzalez. I was very fortunate enough for a short time to sit on as a liaison to the EAC, and then I just had too many things coming at me with my professional life and so on and so forth, and I couldn't make all of the meetings. I think especially I realized I couldn't make the alternate week meetings where some of the deeper work was taking place. So I really do regret having to leave the committee, but appreciate very deeply and got the opportunity to gain insights into the very things that you're talking about. So this is very helpful. So thank you for that. A couple of things. I think maybe I had suggested when I was on the committee to try to, again, bind more of what the group is doing into the work of Met Council, and that was maybe to have a liaison, have members of the EAC be a liaison to the work of the committees. And I think that the barrier to that, again, which was pointed out earlier, is they're also very busy people, and to add another meeting to their calendar would be difficult. But what I was finding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Leah and Brianne and Councilmember Gonzalez, that there is work taking place in our committees, and for management specifically, I can speak to that, where I was trying to get more of the information that was being shared with the management committee that we were wrestling with when it involved making sure that dollars for contracts to MCUB and BIPOC community business leaders was taking place. And we had a really great presentation just recently that showed that we are making some progress, not where we want to be yet. But I'm just hoping that those are the types of things that the EAC is getting in earnest, so that they can kind of dig in to the facts and the questions. I would say, and again, I know that there are time constraints for everybody, but to have folks from the EAC come to certain meetings where we're discussing those items as it relates to purchasing, that would be more than welcome. We would really appreciate that. Also, can I just ask a question to, also I chair audit right now, and I've thought about those same things. In fact, I think the staff lead on that is Matt Latour, and I've wondered how we can get more into, at least internally, looking at some of the goals that we've got as it relates to some internal audits. So they're also up to their eyeballs in work right now, given extra things taking place in the pandemic. But whether it's internal or external, I think there does need to be an accounting back to the EAC, certainly, and then the Met Council in some form or fashion. Lastly, I'm just curious, is the BIPOC work group still meeting, and is there any potential intersection with that group in the EAC? I'm just trying to always find ways that we can dovetail our work together and have more council members connecting to the EAC's work and vice versa. And then lastly, as it relates to money being allocated to the EAC, I'm not sure if our staff has done any investigating on that. We always have to find out if it's permitted in statute, because we are only a creature of the Minnesota legislature, and everything we do is monitored and authorized by them. But I hear you loud and clear that you need more resources and dedicated staff time. And I also want to ask a question too, as it relates to kind of the statement about things ending up a little bit defensive because you're on the receiving end of a lot of information with little time to go for your own discussion and giving and sharing back, which is really the point of the EAC to the Met Council. Has that been consistent since the beginning of time? Is there an ebb and flow to that? And is that in part some of the reason that you'd like to have the regional administrator be your direct contact for the EAC? So thanks for my whole list of questions. Some of it was more me pondering things, but really appreciate the time that you've put into this today.
Right. Any other comments, questions, response? Councilmember Chamblis.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate this update and the candid feedback from the Equity Advisory Committee. It was great to see all of the work that the EAC has accomplished for 2021 and continuing. So I definitely want to support that work, and congratulations for what you've accomplished and how you've been able to impact our organization since, you know, we've had our Thrive 2040 being adopted and then having the Equity Advisory Committee the following year. I don't take lightly what has occurred and how your organization has impacted the Metropolitan Council, and would like to see your impact continue. So thank you for your suggestions. I think the Met Council should take a look at all of them very seriously and see what we can respond to and develop a plan to respond to each of the suggestions, ideas, and concerns. Yeah, I know we're all, you know, we all have limited time and resources. We have to figure out, you know, what's the best way to address those. I'm wondering about the composition and the council members. When did, you know, how well has it worked throughout the years in terms of having value add with having 4 council members? Have they, and what their attendance has been like? Is that something that we should look at? If you have 4 people and, you know, they're contributing greatly, that's wonderful. If you have 2 people, that's contributing greatly. But if you have 2 people that are contributing way more than 4 people, you know, it's possible that that's what we need to focus in on, is how can we make better contributions as council members. You know, that would be, I think, a bigger consideration, at least for me, than how many of us sit on the EAC. So maybe focusing in on how we can be effective as council members. That we're really busy. You guys are really busy. You know, let's see how we can meet in the middle.
Any other thoughts? Fredson, there you are.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation and, and the recommendations. I did serve on EAC for the first year. You know, much of what you're reporting out today is dovetails with my experience, and I think that I guess most important for me here would be to know, where do we go from here? I mean, you are actually sending us some really specific asks, and I'm wondering if the management committee could consider the asks and develop some responses in terms of what's doable and not. And I know Councilmember Chamblis just basically said the same, but I didn't hear the sort of the clarity around the next step.
Thank you. One thing I observe, and I see our regional administrators turn their camera on, so, but I'm always kind of impressed that there are a number of initiatives at the Met Council relating to around one of our biggest goals, which is equity, whether it's embedded in the employment area of environmental services or Met Transit or some of the comprehensive planning, and then we have various council activity relating to the BIPOC, everything from the BIPOC group to the just we were hearing from the police safety study, and but they're sometimes lacking this communication, the holistic kind of look at, you know, where are we going? We know, been working with the Center for Economic Inclusion, we're actually talking to the university about doing some financial audits with an equity lens. Mary Bogey can fill us in, but I sensing, and I'm not answering, but I'm sensing this disconnection of communication and engagement. So we should not necessarily have this full response at this minute, but to kind of know that a full response is necessarily warranted, taking seriously your recommendations, and also doing more to kind of connect some dots. And I think you've heard it now several times. Everybody's busy, and COVID's not an excuse, because in a way, sometimes these Zoom meetings can be really efficient, so we can actually, you know, make it more connecting. So I just offer that, you know, it really is, I think, the ball thrown to us as a council to respond to some very specific recommendations with some very specific answers. You know, but, and I will say, just to jump in that we do have a vacancy. You know, that's never a good thing because it's gone on now for a while. We do have actually 2 council vacancies, and it has been in my not so diabolical but fairly transparent plan to find a new member with some energy who would be coming in. We have a vacancy in the management committee as well, and that would be kind of a, you know, when we do have it announced, 2 new council members, hopefully there's opportunities for some real fresh energy. Just kind of offer that. Anyway, Administrator Boki, did you have a comment?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I was just going to say that I think that the management committee is the perfect place to tackle this. Our Deputy Regional Administrator, George Gonzalez, you know, has begun engaging with the EAC as well. And I think that's a good place for us to make those connections and take a look at the recommendations that have been made. We do have some limitations. Of course, again, we are a creature of the legislature, and so the ability to pay members right now, that is not allowed in statute, but we certainly can take a look at some of the other areas as well. But I absolutely think the management committee is a good place to tackle that, and between the Deputy Regional Administrator and I'm sure that we can provide more support to the group.
Any other thoughts, questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, and thanks, Mary, for that. And I look forward. And I serve on the management committee, so if that's where we're going to continue advancing this, I look forward to being part of that conversation. And just to point out, and I really want to thank both Leah and Brianne for their work. Please carry our thanks back to the rest of the group. I mean, it's incredible work that you're doing when you go over what 2021 looked like. So many thanks for that. And just to really lift up and point out, we can continue these conversations in management committee. But several of the recommendations have more to do with sort of with our leadership, or they're not resources or resource intensive. And one that really stands out to me, and I've been thinking a lot around our work, is the comment that there's more sort of one-way engagement where our staff is informing the group, and the lack of sort of a quality conversation based on that information. And you know, I'm not a community engagement expert. We have some here in the room, I know, and that work for us. And that's like the lowest level of engagement, right? That one-way conversation. And so again, no additional resources needed, just kind of a different attitude and approach to that. And so if this group's going to come together and provide this service to the region, how do we make sure that their experience or their ability to provide guidance is fully supported? And so I look forward to that. And then this has come up before about how this connects into our work. And I'm guessing all of our advisory committees could probably raise a similar interest or a similar concern. And so I think that, again, it's not a resource, and we have to spend more money doing it. We just have to spend the money that we already have dedicated toward this in a more effective way. So again, look forward to continuing the conversation in management committee. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead. Yep.
And I just want to add another thing too. And I know we do this in our reports that we do get at the council. And I know that equity is referenced, but it is nice to see when reports are finally rolling up to the council and there's a lot of information that's coming our way, and it's gone through committees and various engagement. But it is nice to see in a report how this does relate to the goals of this council and Thrive. So specifically stating, you know, it would be nice to know that, you know, this piece of whatever is working to satisfy recommendations coming out of the EAC or whatever group we've got, whether it's environment or, you know, safety or, you know, all of that. So I like to see those things that we've, you know, at the end of the day, we are checking the box in a good way, not just box checking, but making sure that we are going down our list to see that all of the various components of advice and information are coming through, and we are seeing that they have come through. This council early on was notorious And maybe it's because of how we meet now with Zoom, but we were constantly saying, how was community engaged? How can we be better at community engagement? And now I know Sam is leading, you know, community engagement as well. And with Mr. Gonzalez leading, you know, I think we're going to continue to get better and better. But I hear the EAC loud and clear. And from my time on the group, I can reflect what they're going through. And on management, I welcome it, because so much of what we're doing in management, I think, relates directly to what they're trying to impact.
Thank you. That was really well stated. Any other thoughts? Well, I'll just close by repeating our appreciation. Thank you for your work, your deep work this past year, staying with us, committed, your interest, your deep passion, which we need to not just honor, but to follow up with your very specific recommendations. So again, we will hopefully have you back, and also we'll set a course to what we need to honor what is really in the benefit for this vision for this region. So, if there's any other comment or concerns, Brianna, Leah, and Francisco, appreciate your being with us today, and we'll look forward to our next meeting.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
We will be in touch. Anything else? Alrighty, it's nearly 5 o'clock, so you get a whole hour to your day, like magic. And this meeting's adjourned. We will certainly see you soon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.